Subscribe or they will haunt you.
What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up during the middle of the night? The sound of my mother sobbing and screaming for help. Granted, it wasn't actually the middle of the night. It was like 7:30 a.m. But I woke up from a dead sleep and had bolted halfway down the hall before I even really registered what it was I was hearing. All I knew was that she sounded hysterical and she was screaming the word help over and over. Thinking back on it now, I specifically remember hearing "Emmy, help me please," and just "Emmy, help me," and just my name alone, over and over. Turned out she'd slipped and fallen in the backyard and thought she'd broken her ankle because of how terrible the pain was. It was raining and cold outside and it was only she and I in the house, so there was no one else there to help her. I sprinted down a flight of stairs and out into the backyard at top speed. In fact, I crashed through the back door so quickly that it slammed onto the outside wall of the house and rebounded hard enough to nearly shut itself again. To this day, that's one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me, period. The sound of my mother crying for help. She turned out to be fine, by the way. It was one of those injuries where it hurts and swells really bad when it happens, but turns out not to be a break, just a bad sprain. For a few days over the weekend I was visiting family down in Denver. It's not usually a bad area, but around 12:00 at night I was sleeping on the couch when I was woken up to an extremely loud banging outside. I stood up and listened. After a few more seconds of banging, I heard the front door to the apartment complex I was in slam open. We were on the ground floor. All I heard after that was a bunch of people yell, "Get down, get down." I could hear cops knocking on people's doors for about 15 minutes afterwards. Nothing bad happened to me or my family, but I was chatting with the manager of the apartments then next morning and learned that a man that I had normally talked to once or twice had shot his girlfriend in the head and killed her. It was crazy, and I'll never forget the poignant sense knowing that this seemingly regular guy had snapped so easily. This is kind of relevant, but it's 4 a.m. right now. I'm about to go to sleep and I hear a jingling, like keys or something more sinister. I live in the city and there is a lot of foot traffic in front of my house, though usually not at 4 a.m. I sit in my front room with the window open, and this is a slightly sketch part of town, and combined with the topic of this thread, I start to get a little nervous. I look out a crease of my window waiting to see who walks by when suddenly I see a German Shepherd. She just walked into the backyard of my neighbor's house. It's currently unoccupied. This is the second time I've seen this dog wandering around without an owner. I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to go outside now and see if the dog is still around. Was on vacation with my family and I was about 7-8 years old. Woke up one night because of these weird gagging noises. My brother was in the bed beside the mattress which I slept on. So I told him to cut the shit and go to sleep. He didn't stop, so I turned on the light and saw he was choking to death on his own vomit. Scared shitless, I ran and woke up my parents. We rushed out of the door and got in the car, as he was lifeless. Luckily, we saw a cop car and yelled at them while speeding on the highway, and we tailed them to the ER after they understood it was serious shit. My brother lived and we found out that he had had an epileptic seizure for the first time ever, which combined with overeating had caused him to almost choke to death. He lived, but holy shit, I still think about if I had not woken up and we had not spotted that cop car. We were in a small town in Spain, so we didn't know where the ER was. So many coincidences. Damn. Well, the wife and I had been married roughly 2 years at the time. About 2 months after we were married, she started having problems, mood swings, anxiety, irritability, that sort of thing. But we was working opposite schedules at the time, so I was pretty irritable too. Well, her anxiety got worse, and started a beautiful friendship with paranoia. Eventually, she wasn't able to work anymore. She got to the point where she couldn't even leave the house most days. She required more time and effort to care for. Things were pretty intense for a couple in their 20s. We tried doctors, but weren't getting much response from them. Mostly wait and see. She kept getting worse, and things got harder for us. By this point, I'd been forced to quit my job so that I could keep an eye on her full-time. I went to college, taking courses online so I could make sure she stayed safe. Student loans basically sustained us for a while. We moved in with her mom and sister, so that they could take turns watching over her. So anyways, after a couple of major depressive spouts, some self-harm, and a suicide attempt or two to spice things up, the doctors decided they should be dosing her up. They tried putting her on a bunch of different medications. Some made her numb, some made her heart race so badly we ended up in the ER again. One of the medications ended up making her extremely violent. She'd lash out at me, bite me, scream insults and such. A couple of times I had to physically restrain her to keep her from hurting me. And I was the only one in the house that she'd listen to even in the slightest when her brain was misfiring. As you can imagine, I try to sleep when she sleeps. Usually I'm a really light sleeper, and I wake up whenever she makes an unusual noise or rolls over on the bed. But sometimes I have schoolwork due, and the only time to finish it is while she's asleep. So eventually I get a decent amount of sleep lag, crawl into bed, and sleep heavily. Then suddenly I'm awake. There's something wrong. The wife isn't in the bed next to me. I realize that there's more light in the room than normal. The door is slightly ajar, and light is coming in from the hallway. She's standing at the foot of the bed. She's gotten a big kitchen knife from somewhere. We'd been locking up the sharp implements, so at the time I don't know how she got it, and she's mumbling very quietly to herself. I strain my ears and she's arguing with herself about the merits of killing me versus leaving me alive. They were nonsensical, but mostly ran along the lines of, he stops me from doing what I want, hurting people, and killing myself. Those were the cons. And there's no one else I can talk to. And that was pretty much the whole of her debate. So you can imagine how I'm feeling at this point. Scared, terrified, and exhausted. I'd been dealing with such a high stress level for so long that I'd started hallucinating that she'd called for me when she hadn't. And I'm just at the point where I turn into a 17-year-old girl and I just can't even. So I look at her, and I tell her, take my life if you want. It's yours already. I gave it to you when we got married. And then I roll over and pretend to fall asleep. Of course, I'm straining my ears for any sound to warn me I might lose my spleen. But after a moment, she crawls into bed, puts the knife under her pillow, and falls asleep. Once she starts snoring, I carefully pulled the knife from under her pillow and return it to one of the locked drawers in the kitchen. Then I take 5 minutes to shake like a leaf as the adrenaline wears off, and then another 10 to cry silently on the couch. And then I crawled back into bed, and wrapped my arms around her, and fell asleep. To this day, she still doesn't remember it. I stepped out of my bathroom to find my entire house lit up, two imps and a sheriff's deputy in my living room. They proceeded to try to tell me to come sit down, stay calm, relax and let them help me. I was like, WTF is going on? Why are you in my house? Apparently I had suffered a grand mal seizure in my sleep. Never having this happen before, my wife called 911. I must have come out of the seizure, got up, walked into the bathroom to take a piss and had no idea it even happened. While I was in the bathroom, they arrived, came in, and my wife had turned all the lights on and I was oblivious to everything. Weirdest feeling ever. Would not do again. I was up at my dad's cabin for the weekend, and at around 1 we heard a huge crash on our porch. It's a big wraparound porch that has 2 openings. We forgot to lock one, and then we heard a voice yelling fuck, fuck, fuck really loud. This mysterious stranger was now trying to pick the lock on our door to get in. My dad gets his .44 Magnum and I get a baseball bat. My sister, little brother, and stepmother all locked themselves in the attic. Me and my dad went out, and my dad yells at the person, you have about 10 seconds to get the fuck off my property before I kill you. Then that's when we realize it's a 17-year-old kid, and he just collapses and starts crying. We don't know what to do, and my dad tries to calm him down while still holding the gun at him. I go and call the cops. They come and get him. Apparently this kid was in a car crash about 6 miles down the road that killed his best friend and his girlfriend, and he was just trying to find help. I guess what happened is they were driving back down from their camping trip. When they were driving down this really narrow road, they rounded a corner and a deer jumped out, so they swerved to avoid it but careened off of a cliff and died to a river. The driver and one of the passengers were unconscious, and the kid on our porch was relatively okay. He was able to get out of the car as water was getting in. Though the other two were right behind him. When they weren't, he tried to save them, but he couldn't, as and watched his friend and girlfriend drown right in front of him. I don't know where he is today. But if you're somehow reading this, buddy, I am really sorry we were about to shoot you, and I am so very sorry for what happened to you, and I hope you are okay. I'll try and find the news article, but this was about 6 years ago in a small mountain town, so it may be hard. A cold, lifeless hand falling flat on my face. Took me a second or two to realize it my own hand that I had been laying on. It was cold and numb from the elbow down. I woke up once and my hands and feet were completely numb. I remember biting them to make sure, and when they started coming to, they got the tickly feeling you get when your sleeping limb wakes up. Except it hurt really bad, and I started throwing my hands against the wall. I later concluded I had cancer because Google. When I was 18 I was in a house fire. Since then I've been terrified of fire. The story takes place roughly a year later when I was 19 and had just moved into my own apartment. As an incomplete quadriplegic, this was a huge deal. It was around 2 a.m. and I'm dead asleep. I suddenly wake up to my dog howling and the fire alarm blaring. I am fucking terrified. I'm also only wearing underwear. I throw on a shirt, get into my chair as quickly as possible, and head to the exit. This is when I realize how f***ed I am. I'm in the 8th floor with no way down. I'd taken so long getting into my chair, there's no one around. I just started sobbing uncontrollably. I feel a tap and see my 2 male neighbors standing over me. They ask if they can help and I stammer yes. Without hesitation, one picks me up out of my chair and the other grabs my dog's collar. I forgot her leash in my panic. They carried me down 8 flights of steps and held me outside in the 50-60 degree cold until they somehow found a chair for me. They also got a blanket from somewhere to cover me up with. They consoled me, calmed my dog. After we were allowed back in, one went upstairs and brought my chair back down. They walked me to my door and told me to come to them if I ever needed anything. They moved shortly after, but that experience is one that will always stick with me. Obligatory top comment. Wow, OMG gold edit. This is my highest rated comment, and thanks to whoever gilded me. Glad you all enjoyed it. I hope they know how much they affected me and now many others with their kindness. I woke once to a strange, high-pitched trilling sound and bright lights beaming through my window. For a second I seriously thought I was about to be abducted by aliens. Then I realized it was a toad doing its mating call in the front yard and car parked on the street with the headlights on. I once woke at 5 a.m. to someone whisper shouting, if that's a thing, my name. I thought maybe my dream had thrown me off or something, but I was still pretty freaked out. Then I heard it again just when I was just about to drift off to sleep again. Turns out my dad had been out with his drinking buddies and was locked out of the house. I woke up at about 3 a.m. to the back door opening. I was in a panic and couldn't hear properly over my BF snoring. I thought I could hear quiet footsteps. Then I heard the lounge room door open and all this noise. I tried to wake my boyfriend up quietly by nudging him and shaking him, but that fucker wouldn't wake up. I knew I had to get up myself and look. I dialed 000 in my phone, ready to hit dial as soon as I saw someone, and quietly opened the bedroom door. The lounge room door was only open a little bit. I turned my phone light on, ready to bust some chops, and kicked the door open. There stood my dog, totally stunned. He had a shortbread cookie in his mouth and a ripped plastic bag with more cookies at his feet. He clearly did not expect to be caught on his snack run. TL. Doctor, my dog is the cookie monster. Edit. For those who may be wondering, this is the culprit. Well, it was about 8 months ago, about 2:40 a.m. I was sleeping in my bed when I heard a loud bang in my kitchen. Unaware of what it was, I got up and wasn't sure of anything. I get my gun from my safe and walk out. I then hear a huge rattle of pans and plates falling on the floor. I was really freaking out. My blood was pumping so hard and it was so bad I was starting to get a headache from it. I creep out of my hallway. It's pitch black. I look in the kitchen, poking my head in. I see 2 strong glowing eyes staring at me. So fucking scary, man. It rustled my jimmy so hard. I booked it back in my room and popped open the window and hopped the fuck out, cause I don't got time to deal with that bullshit. I was fucking scared. I was on my phone about to dial 911 when I remembered that I bought a fucking cat like a month ago and it ran away and came back that night. Needless to say, I saved a nice pair of undies from being slaughtered by my fatal bowel movement of terror. I knew I shouldn't have bought a fucking cat. Freaking cats, man. I actually love cats, partly for the reason they just don't give a single fuck. What did you do afterwards? Bought a dog. Somebody trying to break in. I was living alone at the time in a little studio flat in the city center. It was about 3 a.m. and I was woken up by some crashing sounds in the hallway. And then somebody started kicking hard at my bedroom door. Fortunately, my door at the time was a pretty hefty fire door with a good strong lock, so I had enough time to call the police before he did any damage to it. I was living pretty close to the police station, so they turned up fast with dogs and caught him still inside the building. As it turned out, the guy was absolutely wasted and looking for somewhere to sleep, and from the outside my place still looked like the empty nightclub it used to be before it was converted into flats. So my guess is he thought it would be empty, rather than actually attempting to attack anyone living there. I was still very shaken up by it at the time.